Alright guys, what's up? I'm Ash and welcome back to my home gym. This video is going to be an introduction to the kettlebell swing technique. Before we get into that, this channel is all about how to stay lean, strong, and healthy. So if you're looking for more videos to help you out with that, please consider subscribing. Alright, so this video is a follow-up from my video on the introduction to the get-up technique for the Healthy Rebellion community. I had a request by Jeremy, so this is going out to him. The Healthy Rebellion is a small online community of independent thinkers and rugged individualists committed to avoiding the sick care system and helping others do the same. If you're looking for support and accountability on your path to staying lean, strong, and healthy, consider joining us over there. I'll have a link in the video description below if you're interested in signing up. So the kettlebell swing technique, or I should say this kettlebell swing, is predominantly a hip hinge movement. So by a hip hinge, that means we are learning to hinge the hips. Now, when we talk about the core, your hips are the other half of your core. And if you want to be strong, powerful, and athletic, you need to develop your hips and your hip hinge in particular. The kettlebell swing is the most fundamental kettlebell technique, and all of the more advanced exercises like the clean and jerk and the snatch that we would do later on are going to be built on a foundation of the swing. If you already know how to hinge the hips effectively, the kettlebell swing is a very safe and effective exercise. However, if you don't know how to hinge the hips properly, the kettlebell swing can be a great way to hurt your back. And since most people in the 21st century spend way too much time sitting down and are sedentary, very few people have an efficient hip hinge. Since that's the case, when I'm first teaching people how to do the kettlebell swing, I like to take them through a specific sequence of progressions. So we're gonna break the exercise down into we're going to scale the exercise, I guess, into 4 different movements or exercises before we go to a complete swing from the ground. Before we get into that, let's just take a look at an easy set of kettlebell swings. So I'm going to start with the bell out in front of me, unlike with a deadlift where you're going to want the weight centered between your feet. For the kettlebell swing, we start with the bell out in front of us, hinge my hips back behind me, grab the weight, shift back slightly, I get everything tight, hike, and go. All right, now you may have seen off to the side here that I have a variety of different kettlebells in different sizes and weights, and the question naturally arises, which one's right for you, especially in the beginning. Okay, so I have here 3 different size kettlebells. This one is around 8 kilos, or it's 15 pounds. This will be a good size to start with for most of the ladies. This is a 16 kilo kettlebell, or it's 35 pounds, I think, in Imperial. This is going to be the average starting weight for most men, and after for the ladies, after they get used to using the 8 kilo, that they'll be able to jump up and pretty much stick with the 16 kilo. And then this is the 24 kilo, and for most men, after they get competent with the 16 kilo, we'll be able to move up to the 24 kilo. And then if you're a bigger or a stronger guy, then you'll be able to move up to the 32 kilo. Now, those weights aren't set in stone. You know, some strong women may be able to start right out with the 16 kilo, move up to the 24, and then even the 32 kilo. Some smaller men may need to start with the 8 kilo and may only be able to move up to the 16 or the 24. Let me see, all of these are Apollo brand kettlebells. Is actually kind of a cheaper off-brand kettlebell, but they work just fine. The only, I would say, the biggest drawback of the Apollo kettlebells is, for one, they usually come with a rubber stopper on the bottom, which this one still has this rubber bottom here on them. That I hate these. I find them to be just a giant pain in the ass, and I usually take them off. But they're meant to protect your floor if you're using them indoors. So I suppose that might be, they might have some value in that case, but I almost always use my kettlebells outside, or I'm on carpet, or I'm out here on my rubber mat, in which case, like I said, I just find them to be a pain in the balls because they catch on stuff. And then also the other drawback of them is that the diameter of the handle is only about a 1-inch handle, compared to over here I have a Power Max kettlebell that's more like a Dragon Door style kettlebell. It has the larger, 1.5 inch, 1.75 inch diameter handle on it. It's a little bit more difficult for the grip, but those would be the only two drawbacks that I would say about the Apollo brand kettlebells. I also have this Yes for All brand kettlebell here. It was just again, it was a bargain value kettlebell that was available on Amazon. Obviously, with the way things have been the last year, the cost of home gym equipment has gone through the roof, and I've seen people, I happened to actually buy this before things got crazy, so I think I may have spent, I don't know, around the neighborhood of $100 on this, I think. And then after things got stupid, I saw it going for like $600. So the point of the story is they all work just fine. They're just a hunk of metal, right? It's a cannonball with a handle on it. It's low tech, high concept. So I wouldn't really stress too much on which brand of kettlebell that you get started with. One consideration is the shape of the handle. I've seen some, like the ones at Dick's Sporting Goods or whatever, and they have like a really long, sort of boxy, high kind of handle on them. Those I don't really like that much. You do kind of want to have something where you're going to be able to hold it comfortably, either this way or with the bottom up. And we're going to be using that in other videos in the future for different exercises, goblet squats and whatnot. As I mentioned in my video for the get-ups, based on my martial arts experience, we're going to look for the square within the circle. So again, what that means is that in every smooth and continuous movement, there are going to be key shapes or positions that we want to sort of acknowledge and make sure that we have them dialed in and precise. The kettlebell swing is the same way, and I like to break it down basically into 4 key positions, 6 if we want to include the setup and the initial hike, but we'll get more into that. Okay, so from looking at me from the side, the 4 key positions are going to be, naturally is the hinge, or you can call it, it's also the backswing or the phase from the backswing into the hinge. Basically it's the hinge. Okay, so again, there's the hip hinge here, and we're gonna be here, right, with our elbows in tight to our sides, and the hands are gonna be basically underneath our perineum. The next position or phase of the movement is going to be the pop. So from the hinge, we come to the pop. So this is all hip movement. Boom. Boom. What we don't want to see is this. And this is where a lot of people are going to struggle with in the beginning, which is why we're going to go through these different progressions. From the pop, we have the float. From the float, we go to the drop, and from the drop, back to the hinge. So the entire sequence, so let's include now, I said 6, including the setup, the initial setup and the hike. So from our initial setup position, into the hike, pop, float, drop, hinge, repeat, pop, float, drop, hinge. And then from the hinge, when we're done with the set, we'll return the weight back to the initial setup position. Now, when I'm first starting out with people and I'm teaching them to swing, I like to make sure that at the minimum they at least have the necessary mobility to get into the setup position. And so the first progression of the kettlebell technique that I teach is just called the dead stop swing. And so we're going to start out with the bell in our setup position, and it's helpful if you sort of use your hands and press back into the crease of your hips to help sort of initiate that hip hinge and make sure that you're not doing this sort of good morning type of movement where the shoulders are moving forward. The shoulders are more or less going to stay in line with your ankle, knee, and center of gravity, and it's the hips that are going to move back. So I'm going to push the hips back, boom, get into this nice deep setup position and reach forward to grab the bell. So coming here to the front, again, initiate the hip hinge, reach forward to my bell, and then I rock my hips back slightly, and the bell is going to cock to about a 45-degree angle. So this is going to be where I'm going to start from. And before I do anything, I'm going to make sure that I get tight. Everywhere is going to get tight. All power comes from the ground. So you need to tighten up everything, connect all your joints, and make sure that you're actively connecting to the ground from here. I'm going to put a little tension, additional tension into my glutes, into my hamstrings, so I'm feeling that everything is nice and loaded from here. I'm going to hike the bell behind me and just return it to the original position, and that's 1 rep. So you'll also notice that my breathing is very deliberate. I like to take a nice big sniff of air as I'm pulling the bell into the hike position, because when we move later into the pop, we're going to want to do that with a nice compressed breath out or exhale to help drive an additional power. So once I see that whoever I'm working with is able to get down into the position, into the setup position, and is able to keep their back or their spine in a nice neutral position from the setup into the hike and back to the setup position, then we're ready to move on to the next progression. Okay, so the next progression that I like to teach I call a high box swing. Now, one of the keys to a safe and effective kettlebell swing technique is to keep the bell at or above the knees. This is one of the areas that people often struggle with when they are first learning how to swing the kettlebell. And what you'll see is a failure to what they call tame the arc. So remember, from the hike, we come to the pop. From the pop, the rest is all float, as momentum is carrying the bell upward to about chest height. Now what you'll see is people failing to tame the swing, and the bell will start to travel away from the body and will carry you forward slightly. And then again, people will start going into this sort of good morning type movement, and you'll see that the bell is now traveling too low, and on the back swing has dropped down below the level of my knee and is putting my back into this sort of forward flex position. That's not good. It's not what we want. So by setting the bell up onto a box, that we're going to stand in front of is going to accomplish two things. The first thing is that in order to clear the height of the box, I'm going to have to keep the bell higher where we want it, at the height or slightly above the knees. Secondly, because the box is behind me, is going to force me to hinge my hips correctly in order to reach the box and to be able to both pull from and return the bell to the box. All right, so that's going to look like this. Again, I'm standing in front of the box, so that again from here I have to reach behind me with the hands. Okay, now I'm going to again just tilt the bell to a 45-degree angle. I'm going to get tight, and it's all hip drive. I'm just going to pop from here and return the weight back to the box. Let's see that again from the side. Now, when you're first starting out with this, you may find that you don't have enough hip drive for the bell to move from the pop into the float. And when I'm working with people, I don't care, right? As long as their form looks good from the pulling from the box into the pop or the hip drive and then returning the weight back to the box. If the bell doesn't go into the float, it's fine, because you're still developing that motor skill and the coordination, and then just the strength and power to be able to propel the bell fast enough. As you improve with these high box swings and with the dead stop swing, the strength and power of your hip drive will improve, and you will naturally start to progress from the pop to the float. Now, the next progression is going to be somewhat optional. But again, because just people are out of touch with their hips from being so sedentary and spending so much time sitting down, they tend to be very knee dominant. So even in exercises like squats and a regular deadlift, the knee ends up playing a much bigger role than it should. And so we don't get quite as much activation of the glutes as what we would like to see. So this next progression, we're going to use a couple of blocks, is going to basically eliminate any contribution from the knee to the swing, and so that means it's going to be all hip drive. The other benefit of this progression is that, again, it's going to force you to keep the bell at the right height. So in other words, it's going to force you to tame the arc when you come back down. So I've got some yoga blocks set up here. And so just by way of demonstration, again, if I fail to tame the arc and the bell is moving out in front of me and I start going into this good morning type movement, the bell is going to pass too low and I'll ding it into the mat on the back swing. So again, by using this position elevated on the blocks and removing any contribution from the knee, but it's also putting me into a height from the mat, which is going to force me more to tame the arc and to keep the bell above the knee. And so because I am sort of handicapping myself by coming down to this tall kneeling position, I'm going to move down in weight. But the setup will be exactly the same. I'm going to bring the bell out in front of me. I'm going to rock back to load my hips. The bell's going to be 45 degrees. I'm going to get tight, pull the bell to the hike position. Okay, so before we move on to the full kettlebell swing, I'd like to suggest that you go back, no bell whatsoever, and just practice your 4 positions. Hinge, pop, float, drop. Especially from the float to the drop, so that your elbows come back close to your ribs before you initiate the swing. So, before you initiate the hinge. So this is one of the mistakes that you'll tend to see people do frequently in the beginning, is they start to hinge too early. So in addition to failing to tame the arc and letting the bell carry you forward and bringing you into that sort of good morning position, another fault is to hinge the hips too early, which will have the same or similar effect. It's going to end up with the bell being too low below the knee and cause additional strain on the back. So really make sure that you've got a good handle on those 4 key positions. Now, when we transition into doing the swing as a fluid continuous movement, those 4 positions is going to really just turn into 2 movements. You're only going to be able to do it as a 2 count, but you'll still be able to recognize because we're going to go from the setup to the hike, and then it's going to be pop, and the float is going to happen. Then you're going to drop and hinge, and so it's just going to look like pop and hinge, pop and hinge, pop and hinge. All right, so that's going to look a lot like this. I get in front of my bell, I push my hips back, get into that nice deep hinge, reach forward to the weight, rock my hips back, load up, get everything tight, hike, pop, hinge, pop, hinge, pop, hinge, pop, hinge. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video. That's the introduction to the kettlebell swing technique. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. Stay strong and healthy. I'll see you guys next time.